With one boat for every 6 residents, this state is the boating capital of America. That should come as no surprise for a place that's known as the land of 10,000 lakes. Greetings from Minnesota, the 32nd state admitted to the Union on May 11, 1858. With 5 million people, it is the 21st most populous state.
We're a state of good enough people, good for all reasonable purposes. We're a modest people. We're ferociously modest. We may be the most modest. We may be #1 in modesty in America.
Why so modest? The winter weather is almost certainly a factor. After all, it's hard to be arrogant when you're freezing. And the land of 10,000 lakes can get cold. Very, very cold. In fact, the Twin Cities metropolis of Minneapolis-St. Paul is considered the coldest major urban area in the United States and one of the coldest in the world. In January, the average daily high hovers around 22 degrees.
I used to live in Siberia for a while, and there are days when I'll check the weather and it turns out it's warmer in Siberia than it is in Minnesota.
You walk down the street with your hands stuck down deep in your pocket and your face is all red and there's stuff coming out of your nose, and it's a magnificent time of year. I'm sorry that people can't have it everywhere in the country.
The silver lining in all this frigidity is architectural innovation. The roof of the climate-controlled Metrodome is essentially a giant Teflon-coated fiberglass baggie, which needs 250,000 cubic feet of air pressure per minute to stay inflated. When it was completed in 1981, the dome was the world's largest multi-use air-supported stadium. The chilly weather also inspired the nation's first enclosed shopping mall. That opened in Edina, Minnesota, way back in 1956. 6 years later, the famed Skyway system was built in Minneapolis, providing more than 8 miles of enclosed walkways, with 63 enclosed bridges crisscrossing 80 downtown blocks.
I do like the cold weather, but the problem is that when you have to go to court or you have to go to a business meeting and you have your nice shoes on, you can't walk out on the dirty, snowy ground or you're going to mess up your shoes. So you have to have a clean place to walk.
For escaping the cold, however, nothing quite compares with the Mall of America in Bloomington. 4.2 million square feet, 520 retail outlets, and a 7-acre amusement park, all under one roof. Believe it or not, the mall is largely unheated, but always comfortably warm, thanks to skylights, electric fixtures, and the body heat of roughly 40 million visitors a year.
On any given day, we have so many people at Mall of America that we're actually the 3rd largest city in the state of Minnesota by population. We have everything you might find in a city. We have our own police precinct office, we have our own post office, and we have our own church here at the mall.
Minnesota's name actually comes from a Sioux Indian word meaning water that reflects the sky. Not surprising for a state with 10,000 lakes and the Mississippi River.
Minnesota's Twin Cities were built on the Mississippi River. St. Paul was the head of riverboat transportation on the Mississippi River, and Minneapolis was built at St. Anthony Falls, where the sawmills initially and then flour mills were able to get water power from the river.
The river also provided excellent transport for Minnesota's early timber industry, which attracted many northern European settlers with logging backgrounds. By the 1880s, 71% of Minnesota's non-native population was first or second generation European. Half of the newcomers were Scandinavians, attracted by a climate and geography reminiscent of their northern homes. For a handful of Minnesotans today, home is so far north that it's actually in Canada. It's the only U.S. land, apart from Alaska, that exists above the 49th parallel. Known as the Northwest Angle, this geographic anomaly is the result of a mapping error made right after the American Revolution, which determined the border between the United States and Canada.
A few years ago, there was a move by the people up there to secede from Minnesota and the United States to become part of Canada. That was a kind of a ploy on their part to get better treatment in terms of both taxes and fishing rights. All 12 people wanted to secede.
About 200 miles away in northeast Minnesota, you'll find the state's economic life source, where black gold means ore, not oil. The iron ore veins of the Mesabi Range were discovered in the late 19th century.
Mining went into full swing in the 1890s, and the industry that resulted mined high-grade soft ore that could be readily mined, and this became the leading source of iron, which was used to produce steel in the U.S.
But in the 1950s, the deposits of high-grade ore were almost completely exhausted. So a team at the University of Minnesota developed a technique that would allow the extraction of ore from lower-grade rock called taconite, which was previously discarded as waste.
Taconite is a hard rock similar to flint that also contains a significant amount of iron. The taconite ore in Minnesota is about 1/3 iron, and the process developed at the University of Minnesota is able to double the iron content of the ore to about 2/3.
This new process saved Minnesota's mining industry. Since the year 2000, the Mesabi Range taconite mines have provided 2/3 of the iron used to build American cars, ships, homes, and bridges. Minnesota's business and industrial community is fueled by one of the most highly educated populations in America. Minnesotans also display a great appreciation for the arts. Minneapolis, for instance, boasts more theaters per capita than any other city outside New York. This love of culture extends to radio. In 2005, residents donated millions of dollars to Minnesota Public Radio, whose programming reaches around the globe. That success is due in large part to one of Minnesota's most prominent and recognizable citizens, Garrison Keillor.
You know, it's not like I picked out Minnesota from, you know, a selection of states or conducted a cost-benefit analysis. I was born here.
Garrison Keillor came to work for Minnesota Public Radio in 1969 as a classical music announcer. We hired him because he had a good voice and he could pronounce all of the names of the composers on a classical radio station.
A trip by Keillor to the Grand Ole Opry radio broadcast in Nashville, Tennessee, proved inspirational.
He went to Nashville, sat in the Ryman Auditorium, watched the Opry, came back and he said, I'd like to try to do that. I'd like to have a live radio broadcast.
You're listening to a Prairie Home Companion coming to you live from the Fitzgerald Theater here in downtown St. Paul. And we did a radio broadcast in 1974, July the 6th, in front of about 20 people in the audience. Not all of them stayed until the end. I've never modeled clothing before in my life.
Who said you'd be wearing clothing, Mr. Noir?
Today, a Prairie Home Companion is broadcast over 580 stations worldwide. More than 4 million listeners tune in each week for music, stories, and characters with a distinct Minnesota flavor.
Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, my hometown, out on the edge of the prairie. The one thing people should know about Minnesota, you shouldn't come unless you're prepared to stay. It's that good.